Welcome everyone to the Level Up Together series of webinars from the AMS Ludomusicology study group. We're just coming in on the heels of a great AMS and SMT joint conference in Minneapolis. Although you might have heard that there's sort of some stirring remarks about the AMS right now that I won't give any further comment on as it percolates. We're happy here as a Ludo folk, really supportive environment for growing as a discipline together. And today I'm happy to be joined by Gregg Rossetti. Some of you might know that both Gregg and I are composers by trade, like our degrees. But we're also ludomusicologists, and so we wanted to sort of bring this session to help ludomusicologists that might be in the more scholarly realm, music theory, musicology, etc., to really understand some essential skills for handling audio and editing things. So Gregg and I both teach digital audio workstations pretty regularly to undergrads. So here's a bio for Gregg. Gregg Rossetti holds a PhD in music composition from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, with a dissertation on how specific musical tropes build worlds in early console role-playing video games. His research interests are in ludomusicology, and they cover topics such as the use of leitmotifs in world building, instrumental and tangible symbolism, using music as a reward, and the correlation of popular music and video game music. Gregg has presented his research or given music tech related workshops at Game SoundCon, NACVGM, the College Music Society, MAME, and the Society of Music Theory's annual meeting. His current multimedia projects include working as a composer, sound designer, and audio engine designer for multiple indie game developers, including Fanks Games and Not a Duck Games. He's currently the coordinator of music technology and the manager of the recording studio at Rutgers. You might know some of his papers like on 8-bit and 16-bit song form at SMT and the Metroid and space topic, which I understand might be forthcoming in a publication soon. He also has a new game out that he scored, Beyond the Grove, and his album with Madison released the Midgar Ensemble, Melody de la Vie. So just to kind of coordinate, we're going to go about 40 minutes with Gregg during the demonstration, and then we'll go into Q&A where you all get to ask your questions on this topic and related ones of Gregg. And so please use the Q&A feature to drop questions as we go. That way I can sort of like see where we're at, and then I can nominate them basically just as they came in to Gregg at the end. So everyone, let's give a warm virtual welcome to Gregg Rossetti.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that, Thomas. All right. So digital audio workstations. Let's get past the which one is best hurdle. So just as a little background, as Thomas said, I teach the recording arts classes and music technology classes at Rutgers. And the topic that keeps coming up is which DAW do I use? Which one is the best? And a quick history. The simple answer is it doesn't matter. You pick one that works for you. Personally, I became a Cubase convert. To me, I have to tick all the boxes. And if I am, using a DAW, I want to make sure that notation, should I write on the screen? I'm weird that I like notation when I pick a DAW. So that cancels out FL and Ableton. And why do I need notation? Because when I'm doing a soundtrack, I'll play guitar, I'll play bassoon or saxophone, or any of my instruments I have lying around. I like to see the notes in front of me instead of piano roll. So that's a big thing. If they don't have notation, it doesn't work. And I also like customizability. Color is really important to me. And you can see on this screen, Reaper is not very colorful. To be fair, Cubase, when you first get it, isn't very colorful, but it's very customizable. So I will be teaching this session in Reaper because it's free-ish. It's nagware, if you will. If you download Reaper, it'll keep popping up saying Reaper is not free, and you click OK, I'm still evaluating, and you can keep running with it. So the thing with Reaper is it's very bare bones. It's very clear. It comes with a lot of free plugins. I'm going to bounce back and forth only to other DAWs just for aesthetic and context reasons. The workshop, like the way DAWs work, is they all work the same way. There's just different terms for things sometimes and different hotkeys. Like personally, we always learn that Pro Tools is industry standard. And I have Pro Tools on here, and Pro Tools crashes a lot on me. And I don't understand why it's the standard. There's things I like about it. It has beautiful notation. But I can't figure out how to change inharmonic spellings. So there's an issue right there. For editing, but the reason I bring up Pro Tools is there is a free Pro Tools called Pro Tools Intro. So if you're in that kind of ecosystem with Avid, like I'm a big Sibelius user, but but I don't actually use Pro Tools for most things, but they can integrate. If you're at a school that is an avid school, it's probably a good idea to learn Pro Tools. For these projects that we're doing, that is overkill. Like I will show some things in Cubase, and the reason I became a Cubase convert is I was asked to teach a class, and they were teaching it on Cubase, and I was like, "Why? That's an old-fashioned DAW." Then I realized how smooth and customizable and fast it is. You notice I didn't mention my other favorite is Sonar, and then Logic is really simple. However, they're not cross-platform. And as a game composer, I'm on PC most of the time, but I use Mac and I have about 6 or 7 different computers in this room. I like stuff. And I go back and forth. But so you want to use something that's cross-platform. So our main theme today is talk about like basics of how digital audio workstations actually work with audio and what we're actually looking at when you're looking at a DAW. And DAWs can be really intimidating when there's buttons all over the screen. And that's one reason, like, when we look at Cubase, one thing I like about Cubase is there's all these buttons up here that are all just gray. I kind of don't like that, but I like how there's only the one row. Some of them have buttons all over the screen. It's like, what do I do? Most of them go by the 80-20 rule. If you guys are familiar with that concept that you use 20% of the tools 80% of the time, and you don't have to worry about the rest for most things. And that's like good design in most software. Like Sibelius is the same way. There might be lots of stuff, but I pretty much I do 99% of my work with the keypad and the R button, and I can fly through my transcriptions with that. So when we're looking at a DAW, we're looking at a piece of software that can read audio and MIDI files. We're going to focus on audio today. When you are bringing audio into a DAW, the DAW is not actually editing the audio. It's editing references to the audio. So if I'm adding a track here, so with Reaper, I'm going to right click and I hit insert new track, and you get this track right here. In Reaper specifically, you can put any kind of music file on this track. Some DAWs, if you guys have experience with other ones, you have to be very specific. If you have experience with Pro Tools, for instance, the track type has one job. There'll be a track. This is why a lot of my students that reach out, they're confused in Pro Tools. They're saying, I put in a track and it's not accepting my audio. You might have picked a MIDI track. You might have picked a mono track and you have a stereo file. Hopefully you know the difference, how mono is 1 channel and stereo is 2. This is actually very important. In video game music, I'm a old-fashioned chiptune guy, so I like the NES music, which was all originally mono. The NES, if you guys own an NES, you notice there's 2 RCA cables. The yellow is for video and the white is for audio. While Super NES, you got 3 and it's in stereo. So when you bring audio into a computer, you can see if the file is mono or stereo. A lot of the original files were switched to stereo, and it's just good to know that. So if you're in a system, depending where you're presenting, that your file is going to work properly. Good examples, perfect example. I was teaching a music production course, and I wanted to teach the concept of panning. Panning means you have the left channel and you have the right channel. And in old recording, I brought in a Beatles song. A lot of old Beatles would have Ringo over here, right? And then you got George and Paul and John. There's over here. Isn't it weird how the Beatles spell JRPG? It's kind of cool. But anyway, so you got, and the other guys are in this channel. And I tried to show them, it's a mono recording. If only one channel works, you're only going to hear Ringo. And then you're going to hear the other guys. And that's true on headphones. But I was in a classroom that had a poor audio system, and my example was a moot point. It didn't make any sense because all the sound was summed into the middle channel, meaning they got the same image out of both speakers. This might happen at a conference. You might be at a conference when they have a faulty connection. So you want to be careful when you're working with stereo files. That's why some people sum them into mono. Okay. So I opened up a track here. Now, in this track, I know it might be small. Hopefully you guys on your machines can zoom. I can zoom a little, but when I zoom, it messes up. Like, hey, is it going to let me zoom on my PC? Probably not. Maybe the hotkey in Reaper isn't even going. So right here on the upper left, let me get my pen tool back. We have this track right here, and we can name it. I'm just going to call this, I'm going to show you a quick thing with importing audio. So I'm just going to call this music, whatever I call it. I'm also one that loves the color code. There's something aesthetically pleasing about looking at colors, especially if you're getting a lot of audio tracks. For what you guys are going to be doing for the most part, if you just maybe, or let's say you got accepted at Ludo and it's in Europe and you can't go, and you need to do an audio and visual presentation, and you have to do the presentation remotely, and you want to do a pre-recorded video. then it's probably nice to separate. You might have multiple audio tracks. And it's a good idea to color code so you know what you're looking at. Maybe you have voiceovers. Maybe you'll have an interview of someone you want to quote. I like to have them in different colors so I know what I'm looking at. So in Reaper, all I did was right-clicked on the track, went to track color, and right here it says set tracks to custom color. I like blue, so I'm going to hit OK, and it makes the track blue. And I just think that just helps. There's psychology about staring at gray and how depressing that is. So let's add some color to some of these tracks, okay? So I brought this track in here, and on the left, there's this red button. Now, this red button enables recording. I would like to talk a little bit about that later on, like if you guys are doing voiceover, but first I want to show you how the DAW is reading the audio. On Reaper, our volume is right here. Not my favorite thing to turn a knob. To me, that's not the most intuitive thing. So what I like to do instead is on the bottom of the screen, let's get the pen, this here connects to this guy, okay? So this lever here, this little fader, adjusts the volume. It adjusts everything logarithmically in decibels. So if you see these numbers, these pluses and minuses, you guys see that as I'm moving it up and down? You want to have it at 0 as much as possible. Rarely do you want to add volume to a track. Some people get confused by that and they start adding volume to everything and then it distorts the audio. Usually when you're bringing in a track from something, if your voice sounds too quiet over the track, bring the track down. The main quip that I usually tell my students is like, if you want something to sound better, cut. But if you want something to sound different, boost. And that's usually the goal for most, oh, now it's blue, so you can't really see that. But that's like the concept you want to think of here. So you want to think, let's clear the screen for a second. So you boost the volume if you want something to sound different, you cut it if you want it to sound better. And this is something we'll talk about briefly when we talk about equalization. Like if you recorded your voice and you hate the way you sound, or if you have an air conditioner running in the background, you want to see how to get rid of that air conditioner. How do I make my voice sound a little more powerful here? You know, if I put it on a certain setting, I can get more proximity effect. You can do that with an equalizer, and you could do that with volume. So I always recommend not really adding much gain to tracks. Keep it at unity. Most DAWs, like Reaper, if I double click this fader here, if you guys see that, I'm double clicking and it's snapping back to 0. Really good feature to have here, okay? So right here is mute and solo. Mute makes it silent, and solo makes it so you only hear that one. The DAW gods need to get together and get a standardized color scheme. Other DAWs like mute, like if I again go to the Cubase, if I add a track, oops, I just hit. I just had hold on. Move the other way. I'm hitting wrong things. You know, if I on other DAWs, the colors might be different. Like it's red for record, mute is yellow, and solo is red. So that can be confusing if you have time, you know, working with other DAWs. So just focus on the numbers, the letters. I know in Logic, the version I have on campus, they use like headphones for and they use like different symbols. All right. The effects here is a bunch of effects that comes with Reaper. Now, if you guys have experience with Reaper and you click the effects button, your screen here will look different than mine. I have some of my own VST effects. VST is virtual studio technology invented by Steinberg. Now this company, they're the same people that make Cubase. VST plugins are ways to emulate hardware. So if you guys ever watched like an old 80s music video and they're in the studio and you got the guys on the faders and turning knobs, all of that is fun and cool. But in the year 2025, we don't need a lot of hardware. I have produced professional albums when the only hardware I used were necessities like microphones and preamps. So a lot of the effects and stuff in post can be done with free things that come with Reaper. Those are the ones that are called the Cocos right here. Cocos. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that comes with Reaper. The rest of the ones you're seeing here are ones that I own or ones that I've downloaded. So again, VST plugins are universal for, I want to say all DAWs now. If we gave this talk like 5 or 10 years ago, it would have been more nuanced that Logic uses one called AU, audio units, and Pro Tools uses RTAS. I think they realized that was bad for business to have a proprietary kind of system. So if you like love the way, or you don't like the way your voice sounds, and you want to give it a little bit of oomph or something, you can download plugins that you add onto your DAW. But for starters, we have all these Reaper ones that I'm gonna show you some basics of. Okay, so that's in the effects menu. Right. So right here, from left to right, this is your timeline. Right? So the way Reaper works is they're giving you the measures on top and the seconds on the bottom. If you were just doing a voiceover for something, the measures are irrelevant. You just want to look at how long something is, okay? However, if you're editing audio for a game, let's say you're doing a presentation on a game and you bring in a track and you want to actually edit it and make it a smooth cut, it's best to use the timeline and the beats per minute for this one. So I'll pick something. Let's do something fun. Yeah, let's do Shatterhands. I don't know if you guys know this game. This is a game, that late NES game, great soundtrack. I apologize if this is too loud. This might come loud through my audio. So it might be loud in your end, but by the way, what you're doing, what you're hearing is you're getting a feed from my computer through here. So I just dragged in this audio file, and we see how there's two. Why did it just go offline? Oh, that's a Reaper thing. Okay, so it's rereading the thing. Okay, let's do this. I'll write it here. Go back. Okay. So when it said offline, it was trying to reread the audio. Yeah. See, there's two. That's left channel, right channel. Remember I said a minute ago that NES was mono? So this file came from Zophar's domain. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Zophar's domain. It's a treasure trove for video game music, especially older stuff. So when I imported this audio, I know immediately this is a stereo file. Whoever made this file ripped it from the game. They found a way to get the audio from the game, and they turned it into an MP3. So quick things you should understand is MP3, you guys probably understand this technology, is a compressed kind of audio file. The industry standard in audio is WAV. There's also AIF, which is just Apple's version of WAV. So AIF used to blue screen PCs back in the day. I worked in a studio and a client brought an AIF so my computer blue screened. But this here is the highest quality possible. CDs, which are still industry standard, and film, like stuff that you are producing and releasing. MP3 is compressed in that the file is smaller. And how do they make the file smaller? They sacrifice some quality. You lose some of the dynamic range, you lose some of the highest and lowest frequencies. But honestly, for video game music, no one's going to notice a difference because it wasn't recorded at the highest quality, especially if it's NES. Another file format worth noting is OGG. This is my favorite and industry standard for games. OGG uses a different algorithm of compression as MP3. And this matters because when you're importing these into like a PowerPoint, you want to make sure whatever screen presentation software you're using, make sure it can read these files properly. I know for one, Pro Tools doesn't read OGG. So again, they're stuck in the dark ages. OGG, so quick thing about the difference. If you have a 3-minute long song, or 3-minute long piece of music, at an MP3, that'll be about 3 megabytes. An OGG is contingent on the instrumentation. So if the MP3 is just someone singing a cappella, or if it's a snippet of Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, right? You're going to get the same file size if it's MP3. If it's OGG, the a cappella singing will be a smaller file size than the large piece of music. So it's a really efficient format for games because if you have like a click sound, like GUI stuff, like you're clicking the mouse and you hear a click or a little stinger, OGG is a much more efficient way to communicate all that. Okay, so what we have here is MP3, and when I bring this, when I bring this file in here, it is showing me a reference to the audio. Whatever I decide to do to this track does not affect the original track. I have my track here in my my Shatterhand folder here from when I was transcribing it years ago. Okay, so this file here, if I scroll back a little bit, you can see it goes for about 2 minutes and almost 2 minutes and 56 seconds. So our x-axis is time, okay? This is how long the music is. So if I scroll near to the back here, we can see on the top of my screen, let me circle it here. Okay, it keeps like trying to reread the audio. That's just a Reaper thing. No other DAW ever does that. But this here is saying it's roughly 256 is like right here. But the y-axis shows you the volume, the amplitude specifically, but it shows you the volume. So when you look at an audio file, you can see that there's peaks and troughs depending on how loud it is. And that's the instantaneous, the beat. You guys know that beat 1 was probably louder than beat 2 or something. You can see that in the DAW. Right? So we can see at the back end of the thing right here. I wish it would stop, but every time I go to my zoom thing, it tries to redraw it. So yeah, it's every time I touch the zoom pencil. Okay, well, let me do this. Here we go. So if you look right here, see how it's tapering down? That is the fade. Okay? So it's pre-faded. And we can look at that and see that. Now, a discussion of fades. Whenever you make a cut on digital audio, you always want to apply a fade. So the first thing I want to show you is how to add a fade to a track, which is really important. So let's say you were doing a presentation and you wanted to just play the intro part of this. This little, it's like in 2/2. I think it's in 3/2. Go back to the top. Let's say I wanted to hear just that little section. So what you do in Reaper and in, scrolling back here, in Reaper, I'm going to hit S. And S is going to split the track into 2 sections. The thing that you hit to split the track is contingent on the DAW. In Cakewalk, Sonar, it's also S. In Cubase, it's 3, and it turns your cursor into scissors. And you can do a bunch of cuts. I love it. I'll show you another time. Pro Tools, it's B for break, I think. So what's the point? So you know I have 2 sections. I can now take this guy and move it here. Ooh, it was a little too good. I wanted to try to do it a little bit worse. But let's say I didn't like that. Let's say I didn't like where I clicked. And I want a little bit more audio and apply a fade. You can get it back by pulling this here. This is non-destructive editing. Because again, we didn't edit the audio. We edited a reference to the audio file. So if I play, okay, let's say I want to hear the first beat of the next bar. Okay, boom, it was right around here. So I'm just eyeballing it. I'm going to drag it back. You notice that when I'm pulling this, it's kind of snapping to the beat. Well, what I want to do is turn that off with the magnet tool. Okay, on Reaper, it's this magnet right here. If you're on another DAW, you just should look for the snap tool, the grid tool. It's good to have that off, and you can get smoother fades, smoother cuts. So I can do a cut, and I can now, on the side of the waveform, like if you see what I'm doing here, let me make it a, I'm just gonna make it a bright color, just so you can see this, what's happening. Is there like let's do like a bright yellow. Yeah, that's pretty bright. Okay, so look right here in the upper right hand corner. See where my mouse is right now a pointer, like good old fashioned pointer? Bring it to the corner, and it changes to a new icon that looks like, I know it's super tiny, probably on your screen. So right here, yes, sorry, Thomas, I didn't see your quote. Yes, the file is still there. It's just, I'm not there. So I'm going here, and I'm putting a fade. Now this fade helps, it's for 2 reasons. There's a creative reason to make it like smooth when it's ending, so it actually doesn't sound jarring for your presentation, because that's kind of awkward if your audio just hits. There's also a utilitarian reason. If you cut digital audio in the middle of a waveform, so like you got your sine wave, right? And if I cut the waveform like here, it will cause a digital clip. Cubase automatically fades. I think Reaper probably has a function too. I didn't really look into it, but most DAWs, should have an auto fade tool, but a lot of them don't. And you have to remember to always fade. So if I wanted to hear this little segment again, all right, so maybe I want a little more of a fade. Maybe I want to just hit there, okay? That's a nice way to adjust it. If you decided you want the next repetition, it doesn't go away. You get it back. You just pull it here, which is it's pretty wild when I show my students the first time they ever saw it. They're like, wow, it's nice and forgiving if you didn't like your cut. Some tips on good cuts, though, by the way, you can do it by ear. But sometimes ears get tiring and sometimes it gets frustrating. One thing I like doing is setting my DAW to the tempo of the piece of music. So if you look here on Reaper, right, this says it's 4/4. and it says it's 120 beats per minute. Now, I picked a piece that doesn't really have a very clear tempo, but instead of guessing the tempo, there's lots of software out there. There's a TuneBat. I don't know if you guys are familiar with TuneBat. It's a software, it's a website called tunebat.com/analyzer, or if you just look up TuneBat Analyzer, you drag in the MP3 and it will tell you the tempo. You can also pay money to unlock like danceability and happiness. I don't know who does that, but it analyzes the audio for you. It tells you the key, which a lot of times it's wrong. It only knows major and minor. But it's really nice to do that because then you can set your grid to be something that is pretty standard. I'll show you with another example I had planned when something is might be a little mixed meter. So if we go, because how can you have me do something without having mixed meter? So if I bring this in, so go back to Reaper. Oops. All right, so we're in 15, okay? So if we're in 15.8 and I want to get a nice cut, yeah, I can really see, can you guys see clearly in this beginning of the moon? When you see these little snippets right here, okay, the duck emoji is great. So you see these little snippets here, that's really easy to edit. I can simply just click here and hit S. I can delete this guy and bring this here, and I can have a really nice cut of just one bar of 15.8, okay? But let's say you wanted to prove some kind of point. Let's say you were doing a recomposition. Let's say you wanted to talk about something else with this bar. So what I would do is I would set here to 15.8, and I just know the tempo is 180. You can figure it out on your own, but this is a way you can get a cleaner cut in this. Now, oh, that's right. Sorry, I didn't want to speed up. You have to click on. There's a way. Sorry, I forgot to. I did it on my other. It's Control click. I don't know if Thomas remembers the hotkey you hit to make it not adapt automatically. I believe it's here. I didn't want that to speed up. Project. Where is it? Control C, Control T. Hold on. I want to just give me a second. I want, because it's not supposed to speed up like that. It's supposed to. I might have to look it up real quick. I did this on my laptop and I have the default set to do that. But let me real quickly. Hold on. So you heard what just happened there. Reaper, when you adjust the tempo, you don't want it to change the speed of the audio. You want to make sure that you have the project setting time base. That's what it's called. Hold on. Where is it? Give me 1 second. Time base, file project settings. Where is my project settings? Good. Because I did this on my laptop. I forgot to do it in this computer. So right here, you want the time base to be time. So let me circle this for you guys. Something I forgot to say. Also, by the way, I don't know why this is set at 44.1. This is probably an aside that you guys don't have to worry about too much. If you get into recording something, yeah, time beats rather than beats. If you get into recording, this is a number you want to be very careful of. If I hire any of you, I know Madison and James are on a game I just released, and I made sure I told them, make sure you're recording at 48. If you record it at 44.1 or export it at 44.1, that's how many samples per second the DAW is reading. If you record it the wrong one, it will play at the wrong speed. So I just want to make sure have this. So I want to do this at time space, put this at 180. Boop. Okay. So make sure it actually hit OK this time. Where's my project settings? Time base, time. Okay. So I want to make sure when I change this, it doesn't get affected. Now, if you look up here, here's measure 2. Do you see there's a 2 there? This shows you that you now have a nice clean edit. So you have a simple 1-bar edit of what you're doing. This is really useful if you're doing a piece of music that you want to prove, like here is a 4-bar phrase, here is an 8-bar phrase. Setting up the tempo and the time signature really helps with that. So for instance, but again, I can get this back. And I know like the first 6 bars of this tune is in 15.8, if I want to keep going. So I know here at measure 6, it's going back into 4/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the snap, and I'm going to click here, and I can put it back into 4/4. Okay. So, and then you can adjust from there. So there's a nice way to do some clean edits. I know I wanted to, for the last few minutes, I did want to talk quickly about like editing in another way, showing equalization, and another technique. So hopefully this is clear. If you have questions, please save them. I can go over more of this, but hopefully this is clear about non-destructive editing. So again, we can split, and we can do other things. Like you can have fun with this in that. Oops, I hit Control S by accident. You know, I can take this, I can copy and paste things, and you can do remixes really nicely. Okay, so one thing I want to show you guys also is the concept of if you guys are doing voiceover. How do you record voiceover? How do you use light editing effects, light signal processing to kind of make yourself sound a little bit better? So, you know, I hate recording my own voice, but I'm going to do it. So let's say here I want to put in voice and, let's click here. I'm going to be, let's make this, I'm blue. So I'll make myself blue, whatever. Okay. Now, for voice editing and voiceover, the beat doesn't matter at all. Okay. It's all about the time. So you first want to make sure that you have your microphone connected to your DAW. Now, if you were just running on a laptop and you have a laptop mic, it's not the most recommended thing, but sometimes that's all you have. I'm running an RME UFX. I love it, but I won't recommend it to anyone. It's overkill for unless you guys are starting a studio. But I have several inputs. And I have my microphone here connected into input 9. So the way Reaper works is I had to take some time to say I was having a panic attack trying to get this set up earlier. Only one was showing up. It's also not showing any of my labels, which is, I guess it's a Reaper thing. I have to go into the innards and adjust it. But if I go here and I say input 9, I can now see we're going to get feedback because you're hearing my microphone going back and forth here. It doesn't do that in Cubase. That's one thing that's nice about it. It's just the way the routing works in Reaper. So there's probably a monitor mix control, but I can easily, like if I put on the headphones and anything, I can record something. So right here, this is how you insert a track to record your own voice. I actually want to see if my hypothesis was correct because I always record stuff on Cubase. See my Cubase, all my things are organized. Yeah, check. Yeah, Cubase doesn't feedback on me. I'm going to show you something real quick, just on the same concept, but I want to show you a little bit about using plugins. So, if you record a piece of audio, any effect you put on it can be done at any time in the stage. You don't have to set up your equalizer and your compressor if you're going to use any of these or reverb for some reason when you're recording. It can happen after, and it's all editable later, as long as you save your project. And one thing you should note, if you need to take a break when you're working on something, you got to come back, save it as a project file. Some people get confused and they make it, like, let's say you wanted to send it to your friend for their opinion, then you can send an MP3, right? Here's my edits. But you can't edit the MP3 later. You need a project file. And the project file has its own extension, depending on the DAW you're using. So a Cubase project file opens in Cubase. A Logic project file opens in Logic. So make sure you understand that because I've had too many students that were like, hey, there are computers on campus wipe themselves clean every night. So they come in like, where's my I saved it as an MP3. I'm like, why'd you do that? Now you can't load it. So one thing we have here is we hit effects. We can load in, one that I think a lot of you will use is EQ. So what I'm doing here in the effects button here, see it says FX means effects, is a cute way to write it. And I'm going to EQ, which is equalization. And I'm just going to click on this one right here. So if you guys follow that, I'm hitting effects EQ. And I'll show you in context in just a second. First, I want to show you where this is. If you add this thing here, this is an equalizer. Nice thing I like, Cubase 15 came out like yesterday, and they finally added a feature to make your plugins bigger, like the full screen. So Reaper gets points for this. What are we looking at? This is a very not aesthetically pleasing EQ. I'll show you in another one in a second. But an equalizer is a way you can adjust volumes of specific frequencies. So if you recorded your voiceover, and my neighbor who shares my office here, it just came in and I could hear his voice. If I wanted to cut that out, if there's some sound that is bothering us, you can do that a little with EQ and compression. EQ is great if you listen to your room right now. If you hear like HVAC, right? I'm in a pretty quiet place, But if you're in a room with an air conditioner or something rumbling in the back, an equalizer is a great way to cut this stuff out. And most of that is low frequency rumble. The way this equalizer works is you have these nodes here you click on that let you bring the volume down of a certain center frequency. So right here, if I want to adjust the low end and make it, so if you see, again, let me use the pencil, that's what I love about Zoom. Here's 100 hertz, okay? So 100 hertz is around, it's around my lowest note, maybe. My lowest pitch is like G2, and it's, 92. Or 96 hertz. This is 110 hertz, okay? So if you're not speaking that lowly, you don't need any of the sound below that. So doing this is called a high pass filter. Okay? And a high pass filter allows the high frequencies to pass and the low frequencies to, not happy, low frequencies to fail. Okay? So they fail, you cut out the low frequencies, and you can hear only the high ones. I can show you a quick, I'm just going to switch over this because this doesn't feedback, but check 1, 2, check 1, 2. I'm recording my voice with Cubase, and I will EQ it out in a second. All right, so Cubase, it's just more aesthetically pleasing than Reaper. It's not, there's a cheap version if you're an educator. There's Cubase Elements you can get for like $66, and it comes with a lot of bells and whistles. It's not free, but, so I just want to show you real quick because it's a little more aesthetically pleasing. But if I'm going to put in an equalizer here, I'm going to bring in a, my Zoom controls are in the middle of the screen, move this out of the way. EQ. I'm going to bring, I did it in mono, so let's bring in a mono equalizer. I think this one just looks a little better. So, and also watch when I play this. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. I'm recording my voice with Cubase, and I will EQ it out in a second. Okay, so you see that range of those mountains as I'm speaking here. I can use this equalizer to cut out some of those mountains. So this is going to sound terrible, but if you hear this, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. I'm recording my voice. Sounds like I'm talking to an old-timey radio, right? We went back to the 1940s. Actually, old-timey radios were technically this kind of filter, but we don't have to worry about that. So, but if I had some more, like I didn't really need the low partials of my voice, I can put a filter here, and then maybe I want to sound a little deeper. I can boost the frequencies around here. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. I'm recording my voice with Cubase, and I will EQ it out in a second. So this is what I always do for any voiceover work. I do many, many takes, by the way, and the same stuff I was just showing you, it doesn't matter what DAW we're using, the same editing for audio, if you're importing and recording, is the same. I do multiple takes, and I fade. I punch myself in on multiple tracks, and I dovetail things together, and I read. And I read a lot slower than I usually talk because it just helps with the communication. So if I have a 20-minute paper, I usually winds up being, a lot. I usually wind up having to cut things. You don't want to speed it up at the end. I know we're getting low on time. I don't know if you guys want to go over compression as well. I mean, that's used sparingly, or if you guys, I don't know if you want to move the questions because it's about, a little after 5:40. But I can, the time is.
I was aiming for 45 in my head, so you could show
sure.
us
Oh, cool.
compression.
All right, real quick, sure. If you want to talk about compression real quick. This is a little more advanced. There is a 10-hour video on YouTube explaining compression. And I always bring that up when I teach compression in class, and when I teach my mixing class. We do 2 weeks on it, and there's still questions after. In one sentence, what compression really does is it's adjusts volume for you automatically. So if you bring in, I'm doing it just in Cubase right now because I think it's just a little more aesthetically pleasing, but we have all these in Reaper and I can go back and forth. A compressor just lets you say, hey, that sound was too loud, bring it quieter for me. However, if you make everything too quiet, it will be too quiet and you'd have to bring it up later. So right now you might hear, there's people in the office next door, so it might pick up their voice and you might want to adjust it. Or if you're speaking and you automatically get too loud for some reason and it's awkward. A compressor you can put on something and say, well, if it hits a certain volume, I want you to cut the volume down by a certain ratio. And these ratios are in decibels. So if I do a 4, it means every time it goes above a certain volume, it divides the actual volume by 4. If I do 10, it divides it by 10. If it's infinity, It means it does not allow it to surpass. Thou shall not pass this. You shall not pass this certain volume. And that's actually called a limiter. And that's the way a lot of like modern pop and hip hop music is done. They put a limiter on everything, so everything is so loud the whole time. So having a light compressor, check 1 2, check 1 2. I'm recording my voice with Cubase, and I will EQ it out in a second. So if you hear, that's with the compression. I don't know if you guys notice my voice sounds like a lot warmer and less jumpy. Check 1 2, check 1 2. You hear how like jumpy that sounded? If I put a compressor on it, check 1 2, check 1 2. It sounds much more less intimidating and less erratic. It smooths out everything. It helps with your volumes. That's the 2-minute discussion of compression. We can get really advanced later. For your presentations, I do recommend you guys messing around with this. Again, compressor is a dynamic editor. So when you're on Reaper, or any DAW, you go into your dynamics folder, and it comes with a compressor. The reason I wanted to show you first on Cubase is because this one is really kind of hard to look, hard to understand what's happening. You have to know some of the vocabulary. So basically, you say, I don't want you to get louder than this. If you get louder than this, bring it down by a certain amount of decibels until you get to a certain new sound. So compression can help you sound smoother. It helps your volume control, so random notes don't pop out anywhere. Why is there a 10-hour video on YouTube? Because in music, it's used a lot. If you guys hear a polished pop recording, they're sometimes running 6 or 7 compressors, and they're all doing slightly different things. I'm not that, I use like 2 or 3 in most of my recordings, but it is an option. Okay. So yeah, we're 46, so if anyone want to turn it over for questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that primer onto Digital Audio Workstation and Reaper. And as we said before, many Digital Audio Workstations will have a very similar layout, so the skills are pretty transferable between different versions. Yeah, let's give a Zoom applause for Gregg's presentation as we move into our questions.
So what's this?
So, yeah, and applaud emojis and all that.
Applaud emoji, yeah.
Clap, clap, clap. All right, so as we move into questions, I am looking on the Q&A and I don't think we've had any just yet. So please, everyone, if you've been, if you feel like completely lost, feel free to ask a question about where we're at and what got you lost there. If you want clarification on something, we're pretty tight on time. And so there are probably some things that Gregg glossed over that we could do some expansion on. I'll go ahead and kick us off with the question. So Gregg, could you talk about incorporating audio once you've gotten it how you want it in your Digital Audio Workstation or in Reaper? Could you talk about incorporating that into like a PowerPoint slide presentations and embedding it versus like using a YouTube link or something of that nature? Why might you want to take a certain approach?
Oh, definitely. I don't recommend YouTube to trust YouTube for anything. It's a good idea to always bounce out your audio, anything you're doing. So like on that same topic, I'm going to just bring the moon back in here. So when you are done with your edit, so let's say you like your edit. I'm just going to do a quick one just to get it working here. All right, here's your edit. You want to bounce it out of, I use the word bounce. Now here's where things are a little different in different DAWs. Bounce is what Logic uses. That's an old-fashioned word. In Cubase, we use render. And what you do is you want to export this out of your DAW so you can import it into your PowerPoint or whatever you're using. If you are doing, again, a video and you're doing a video presentation, or if you made your own video, like I don't know if anyone was at my Mammy talk this year, I made a little montage of haunted music. And I didn't even put it on YouTube. I made a video in Premiere. I made the audio here. I brought it into Premiere, and then I embedded it because the internet can fail. Classes I'm teaching, when I use PowerPoint, I still use YouTube because sometimes I don't have a lot of time, and I keep having to toggle out of PowerPoint. So you want to go here and export it properly. When you are exporting your audio, you want to make sure you're paying attention to the kind of file format you're using. Wave, like I said, is high quality, same as AIFF, all right, Wave and AIFF. If you want to keep the file size low, you can just use MP3. Fun fact, DAWs could not export to MP3 until only a few years ago. MP3 is not open source. Like I was never able to export to MP3. I had to use Audacity, was like the only DAW that did it. And Ogg Vorbis is one that some don't do. Ogg Vorbis is open source. Pro Tools does not do audio for this. Yeah, but I remember when it was not too long ago. It was like right around COVID. I remember like they finally released a version of Cubase and Sonar that could export right to MP3. So you export to MP3. Always take note of where you want to save things. Keep your computer organized. I say that, but I throw everything on the desktop and then I put it in folders later. You give it a title. No, I would call it like, The Moon Edits. Okay. And then you render the file. Let's see if that crashes. Sometimes that crashes Zoom. Reaper gives you a little fun thing to look at when you're done, which is cute. Not every DAW does that. When you have that file, you want to embed that into PowerPoint. You want to go to the insert. I don't have PowerPoint launched on here. I'm afraid I don't want to crash things. But you go import when you go to edit audio, and you put in the little audio stream. It's more reliable because it embeds it into your project. On the same note with video, if you're doing this with video, I don't know what you guys use for video editing. My school gives me Premiere for free, so it's kind of nice. So Premiere, honestly, is a little clunky. Has some weird crashes sometimes. I don't know if you guys use Canva or iMovie always crashed on me too on the Apple. Wondershare, Filmora, whatever you're using. You can bring in the audio there, and you can do further trims. It's just not as intuitive as using an actual DAW. Okay. Makes sense.
All right, great. What other questions do we have for Gregg?
Zoom. I don't have the chat. I saw the chat pop, but I didn't see what people said.
Yeah, there's chat, there's Q&A. You can raise your hand and we'll just and unmute and speak. Any questions?
If anyone has any questions, do you want me to go over compression for 10 hours? I can. I don't know if I can filibuster that long like that guy. The video I found, it's pretty wild. I mean, I watched the video at double speed, and then he sounded like he was from New Jersey, and I was able to understand him. But sometimes I talk too slow. But I don't know if anyone, you guys all understand. I don't know if you guys want me to go over sample rate and bit depth. I don't know if that's really necessary.
Oh, we got one from James. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see that. What plugins? Okay, for voiceover, I recommend the simple thing I do for voiceover is EQ and compression. That's the simplest answer. EQ specifically, like what I was showing on my curve, because I'm not a voice actor and I rarely do voiceovers. But what I know I like is I would cut out a little of the room. That's the low frequency. And fun fact, I think there's a scientific poll that everyone hates the sound of their own voice. I work with a really talented singer, and he's always like, I don't know, I don't like it. So yeah, we all do. So what I do is I would cut out, it's a little thing about, I don't know how many of you have perfect pitch, or how many of you can translate frequencies to pitch. So my baseline is, I'm a guitar player first, and I know that the A string on the guitar is 110. I think you all know that 440, 440, 220, 110. So I speak a little bit higher than there. I'm usually between B flat and D. Unless it's a student's parent, like, well, they did great today. Nice job. I'm going to start them on another book. And then you're an octave higher, right? But usually when you're speaking, you can guess the fundamental frequency of your voice. However, when we speak, if you guys understand overtone series, we have a constituency of overtones that would copy, and that one's going to be a little flat. By the time we get here, we're actually a quarter tone off. All of that is being generated. And everyone's vocal timbre, or timbre of every sound in the world, is how much harmonics we hear in any given tone. So if you want your voice to cut through better, our ears are most sensitive to 3,500 hertz. 3,500 hertz is the frequency of our ear canal. Some people say it's closer to 3K. Some people say it's a little higher. There's one video I saw when he said our ear canal resonates at 3,500. Pretty wild. I don't know how they figured this stuff out. But that's a sound that like electric guitars make really well. That's why people say, oh, rock music is so loud. Well, no, it's not. It's just where your volume, it's just the electric guitar. So if you want your voice to cut through, let's say you have a backing track underneath and you want to talk over it, your voice will cut through better here. If you find yourself, back to the quip earlier, if you think you want to make something sound better, usually you're better off cutting. If you want something to sound different, you boost. So what I usually do is I would cut sibilants. This is if I don't drink enough water and I sound like dehydrated and you hear too many mouth sounds, I would cut around 8K. If I want to sound more present, I would add 3500. If I sound too present, I will cut that. Okay. If I want to add some boominess to the bottom of my voice, I will add a little bit on the end. Thing you should understand about EQ is you can't add something that isn't already there. If you did not record, I want to also show it in Reaper so you guys can see it's the same kind of concept. It's the same kind of thing. So it's equalizer. It's just this one's just not as aesthetically pleasing, and you can't see the spectrum. But you can't add low end if you never recorded low end, and vice versa. Again, with compression though, if you don't like the sound of your voice, if you feel like your voice volume is jumping too much, light compression works. Not to get too complicated here, but the way a compressor usually works is you want to make sure your threshold is set so it's actually working. A lot of students I've worked with had their threshold set.
Check 1, 2.
When it was all the way down, when nothing was actually being compressed. But if
Check 1, 2.
if it's all the way up,
Recording my.
everything's being compressed and it sounds stuffy. It sounds like you have a piece of paper in front of your mouth or something. So you always, what I recommend everyone do if with compression is get a moderate ratio, like 3 or 4, and then slowly adjust the threshold until you hear it kick in. Don't worry about the other buttons. Don't even touch it. Doesn't even matter. So those help nicely. I don't recommend necessarily putting like reverb or anything that just makes you sound like, that's for music. For voiceover, the other thing, this gets a little complicated. If you're doing like a virtual talk and you like pre-recorded it and you want to have a soundtrack underneath, like I did this for a Mammy paper once because I didn't know if I could make it. So I did the recording and I kind of liked it. I did ducking. This is when I had a track in the background and music the whole time. And ducking is something, it's something called sidechain compression. And this is like a final weeks in a mixing course. So I don't expect all of you to understand every detail how to implement it, but I want maybe something you'll be interested in. It's when you set the compressor, you put the compressor on the track, on the audio, and you tell it to listen to the voice. So every time your voice kicks in, it will lower the volume of the track. And this is a really important technique. You guys are into video games. So you play a video game and there's all these sound effects. Let's say, like the game I just released last week, Beyond the Grove. Check it out on Steam. There's all these sounds on the screen and it gets really overwhelming. So there'll be a sidechain compressor that every time we get too many sounds, I have a certain threshold, it brings down the volume of everything. So you're not bombarded with this sensory overload of sound. So that would be a more advanced feature for voiceover. So EQ, compression, and if you want to get into fancy stuff, sidechain compression, but nothing else you really need. Saturation and stuff. That's for pop. That's for pop vocals. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I'll ask another question here. I know we had talked about this in the pre-talk as well, but could you talk to us some about tools for sourcing game audio? I think most of us probably encounter our game audio through like streaming sites like YouTube or Spotify, but like YouTube downloaders tend to be finicky and get a heavily compressed sound. Some
Right.
soundtracks are higher quality, available on Spotify or Apple Music, but you can't like download it depending on what your subscription is. So how can you source audio and get it into your DAW?
Sure. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. Now, it's good that you brought up like, YouTube to MP3. I do that in a pinch. It compresses it a lot and it's a little bit much. The way I do, now this is something that might be a little complicated. The way I do a lot of this, I'm doing Reaper hotkeys when I go in the Cubase and vice versa. What I do is I actually put in a track in my DAW and I would set the inputs of the track to be, I actually have it set, I would make it, I had to make this stereo. I didn't make a stereo bus. What I would do, I know this sounds complicated, but I would make a stereo bus called, the computer. So I would set the output of my computer, okay, to put this here, and then I'm just going to reassign it. And this is something, there's several different ways to do this. I'm going to show you one way first. We're going to do ADAT 7 and 8. ADAT 7 and ADAT 8. So what I know on mine is I set a different, I put analog instead of ADAT, sorry, that didn't matters. So I make an input on my DAW, which now can accept audio from any channel that it gets. So whatever I do, that's my random notes, whatever I do, it can get audio from anything, any of my sources. If you don't have the capability of doing that, like taking your, the Spotify rip, you can actually run Spotify on your phone or something. I don't know how many of you guys have this is why I have a 5-year-old phone with the 1/8 inch out still. If you don't have that, you need the dongle. So I have an 1/8 inch out and I have a cable, maybe you guys can see, sitting right here. So it's the 3.5 millimeter cable. Make sure it's stereo TRS. And you guys can see this. The 2 little black lines means it can accept a stereo source. And I have it plugged in to 2 channels on my interface. So I can take my phone or my laptop or one of my laptops or something and run the sound, that as a sound source, and record the audio and print the audio into the DAW. Then you get an exact, the only thing that would affect would be the quality of the cable or anything that's lost in translation with the converters. If you're doing YouTube to MP3, that's kind of an issue. I see it coming. Bandcamp is awesome, but Bandcamp you usually have to pay to download again. So you can stream it that way though. There's so many projects I do when I actually stream it from there. If you need to record, if you can't find a recording, let's say you have a brand new game, or if you want to record your playthrough, a great way to do this, if you're playing on your PC or something, is OBS. And OBS can just record the open broadcasting software. I think it stands for OBS. And it can record the actual recording of your screen. I highly recommend, turning off your mic, like the way I do it. Like if you guys see my system, this comes with my DAW, but I would mute my microphone. Like this here is my mic. So when I've done game capture footage, like I wasn't just going to download it. I was like playing the game for once. I would record everything and I mute my mic. Hopefully you didn't hear me. So I muted my mic there. And then this knob here is the output of my computer. And I just, I use a matrix to sync it all up, but I have that bring it into there. So everything that comes from my computer goes into a certain channel. I tell OBS to listen to it. Same way I'm telling Zoom to listen to it. The reason you guys can hear me through Zoom is actually my mic on Zoom isn't this microphone. My mic is actually, I'm telling it that it's a different output from my computer. So when I was playing music from my DAW, you weren't hearing it from my microphone. Or if I plug in my guitar to a direct box, you would hear the guitar just as I do. So if you don't have these extra outputs, all you have to do is do it like a Zoom call. Don't use Zoom to record your game audio though, because it does weird things with the compression. It tries to filter things out. Use OBS to record the game that way. The other one, some of you might be thinking, well, what if I don't have a PC? What if I want to record my Game Boy, or if I want to record my Switch or something? That's a little more advanced. There are converters. There's capture cards, but that involves you buying something. You could probably send the HDMI out into the computer, but you need a capture card. You need an HDMI in for your computer. So it's another way to do things. That's like what Ryan does for like his Twitch. If you guys ever watch Ryan on Thursday nights, which I have to check out again soon, but he would do something like that. So Zophar's domain is my go-to source for a lot of this. I don't trust YouTube as much because they compress things. It's not peer-reviewed. Neither is Zophar's domain, but I just have learned to trust Zophar's domain because he's just got everything. And I just use it for my transcriptions all the time. Yeah, but Thomas put the link there for OBS. I really recommend it when you guys have to record game footage.
Yeah, OBS for me has been really flexible, and so most of my audio examples have just been using OBS to record the computer output from Spotify or some other like a website source, and much better quality than YouTube for sure.
Oh yeah.
All right, what other questions do we have? We're at the top of the hour, but of course we can stay a little past. So, any other questions that we can field now or demonstrate?
I don't know. We don't have to go around the room and everyone give a question. It's not like a class, but it's like everyone. Yeah, if you guys, so hopefully all of you are. That's what I said in my class. If no one has any questions, I'm like, all of you are experts, I guess. So I expect perfect papers, perfect projects. So hopefully it's all good. This topic, like this is the get your feet wet in the simple edits. So the main thing I hope you guys take away is the simple application of effects, but also the non-destructive editing is, I think, the most important things everyone should understand is making the splits and fading them out properly is, and it's just understanding how the edits work here. And my big takeaway is too is it doesn't matter what tool you use. You never ask your plumber what tool he used to fix your toilet, right? It just matters that it gets done. It matters that he knows how to use the tool. So you know your shortcut keys. Like, I, again, I moved to Cubase because the shortcuts were so easy. So it made a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, and we want you ultimately to feel empowered, to go forth and jump into a digital audio workstation like Reaper, which is free and
Right.
available, and
Simple.
use that to prepare your talks, your examples, anything. So we're hoping that we made it accessible so it doesn't seem like scary and so much going on, but like you could see how to do the core operations that you need to do in something like Reaper or Audacity has been mentioned a few times, and that's another really great example
Yeah.
resource
What
for freeware.
Audacity is another good. That's good. It's funny that you mentioned Audacity. I was thinking about that. Back in the day, Audacity was super. What I loved about it, I started teaching on Audacity because it was very bare bones and no bells and whistles, and it didn't have any plugins. It just introduced plugins like 2 years ago. So I wrote that. I stopped. I got kind of annoyed. It's trying to do too much. But yes, you can do this with Audacity. Reaper is just a little bit more flexible. Like I'm just playing around right here. I'm just like, you can make your own little loops. You can do the Steve Reich version and having two different time signatures at the same time and see when they line up. Yeah, Reaper free past the nagging reminders. I know a few people that do pay for Reaper. By the way, sound designers love Reaper because you can actually render multiple sounds at once. I know when people are making like gunshot sounds and they'll have like 6 or 7 gunshot sounds and they can highlight them all and export them all separately. And that's a really nice feature. Cubase does it too, but you need the pro version. Some of the other ones don't do that. On the low pay scale. So it's kind of nice feature. A lot of YouTube videos I watch on sound design are always, they're using Reaper. Nice and simple. All right. Cool. I don't know if there's any
All
other
right.
questions.
Yeah, last call for questions. I think we're good.
Cool.
All right. So with that, let's thank Greg again. Give Greg a
Thank you.
big Zoom thank you for his time, his expertise in talking us through digital audio workstations. Um,
Yeah. Thank you guys.
So the Level Up Together series is going to take us a break for the holidays and the end of the semester. We are going to resume in late January with our third, and then just continue like February, March, April with the next
Cool.
filling out the season. So a lot of cool topics on the way and very relevant ones. Our next topic in January will be over alt academic and independent scholar pathways. So sort of doing ludomusicology outside of that sort of strict pathway of professor, faculty, grad student, that whole pipeline. So stay tuned for that, and I'll be announcing things about that probably in January.